Lost elderly woman strays to a struggling single black dad's door, he lets her stay the night and, Marcus had just finished cleaning up the kitchen after dinner. The sink was full of soapy water, and the smell of warm rice and beans still lingered in the air. His daughter Leah had eaten with joy, telling him all about her day at school. She was a bright 7-year-old who could make even the toughest days feel lighter with her endless stories and laughter. After dinner, Marcus tucked her into bed with her favorite stuffed bear and kissed her forehead. It was their little nightly routine, one that gave both of them comfort. Life had not been easy for Marcus. Being a single father meant carrying more weight on his shoulders than most people realized. He worked at a warehouse during the day and cleaned offices at night. He was always tired, but he never let Leah see his exhaustion. She deserved happiness, warmth, and stability, and Marcus did everything he could to provide that. Their small apartment wasn't much. It had peeling paint on the walls and furniture that had seen better days, but to Leah, it was home, and that was enough for him. That evening was unusually cold. The wind howled outside the thin windows, rattling them slightly. Marcus pulled his old jacket tighter around himself as he sat down on the couch. He was just about to rest his eyes for a few minutes before starting on some extra paperwork when he heard it. A knock. It wasn't loud. It was soft, almost hesitant, like the person on the other side wasn't sure if they should disturb anyone. Marcus frowned. It was late, and he wasn't expecting anyone. In his neighborhood, unexpected knocks at night could mean trouble. He hesitated for a moment, listening carefully. The knock came again, this time a little firmer but still unsure. Marcus stood up slowly, glancing toward Leah's bedroom door. She was asleep, or at least he hoped she was. He walked to the front door, his heart beating just a little faster. When he opened it, he saw something that made him pause. On the doorstep stood an elderly woman. She looked to be in her late 70s, with a frail frame and kind eyes that now seemed filled with confusion. Her gray hair was messy, and she was clutching a small handbag tightly to her chest. She shivered in the cold night air, her thin sweater no match for the biting wind. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I think I'm lost." Marcus blinked. Lost? At this hour? The woman looked vulnerable, and he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. He glanced up and down the street. It was empty, the dim street lights casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. "I was trying to find my sister's house," the woman continued, "but I must have taken the wrong bus. I've been walking for a while now. I don't know where I am." Her words carried both embarrassment and fear. She was clearly someone who wasn't used to asking for help but had reached a point where she had no other choice. Marcus didn't answer right away. He didn't know her, and his natural instinct was to be cautious. He had Leah to think about, after all. But the sight of her shivering, lost, and with nowhere to go pulled at his heart. She reminded him of his own mother, who had passed away years ago. If she were alive and in this situation, he would pray that someone kind would help her. Before Marcus could respond, a small voice came from behind him. "Daddy? Who is it?" Leah had woken up, rubbing her eyes as she walked toward the door. When she saw the woman, her face softened with innocent curiosity. "Is she okay?" she asked. The elderly woman gave a weak smile. "I'm sorry, dear. I didn't mean to wake you." Leah looked up at her father, waiting for an explanation. Marcus sighed. He couldn't just turn the woman away. "It's all right, sweetheart," he said, placing a gentle hand on Leah's shoulder. He looked back at the woman. "Would you like to come inside? It's cold out here." The relief on her face was immediate. "Thank you, son. I promise I won't be any trouble. Just a place to sit for a while until I can figure out what to do." Marcus stepped aside, letting her in. She moved slowly, her steps careful, as though she was afraid of slipping. Inside, the warmth of the small apartment made her sigh softly in gratitude. She sat down on the couch, clutching her bag like it was her only possession in the world. Leah sat next to her without hesitation, her natural kindness shining through. "Do you want some tea?" she asked brightly, remembering how her dad always made her warm tea when she wasn't feeling well. The woman's eyes grew moist at the child's offer. "That would be lovely, dear." Marcus went to the kitchen and boiled some water. As he prepared the tea, he listened to the two of them talk. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Henson. She explained that she had recently moved closer to her sister after her husband passed away. But her memory had been slipping lately. Sometimes she forgot directions or mixed things up. Tonight, she had boarded the wrong bus and ended up in an unfamiliar part of town. Leah listened intently, nodding like a grown-up, even though she was only 7. She asked gentle questions, which made Mrs. Henson smile despite her situation. When Marcus returned with the tea, he noticed how comfortable they already seemed with each other. Mrs. Henson sipped the warm drink gratefully. "You've both been so kind. I was afraid no one would open the door." Marcus shrugged lightly. Everyone needs a little help sometimes. Still, a part of him couldn't stop thinking about how strange it all was. He didn't know this woman. She was a stranger in his home. But when he looked at Leah, leaning against Mrs. Henson as if she had known her forever, his worries eased just a little. Sometimes kindness had to be stronger than fear. The night grew later, and it was clear Mrs. Henson had nowhere to go. Marcus offered her the couch to sleep on. She protested at first, saying she didn't want to intrude, but Marcus insisted. He brought her an extra blanket and pillow. As he tucked Leah back into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, she reminds me of Grandma. I think she's nice." Marcus kissed her forehead and nodded. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think she is too." When the apartment grew quiet, Marcus sat for a moment in the dark, thinking about the unexpected turn his night had taken. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, he felt he had done the right thing. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside, there was warmth, a small act of kindness that had changed everything. The next morning, the sound of birds chirping outside the window slowly filled the small apartment. Sunlight crept in through the thin curtains, bringing a gentle golden glow into the room. Marcus stirred awake from his chair in the corner. He had dozed off while making sure their unexpected guest was comfortable on the couch. His neck ached a little from the awkward position, but when he looked over and saw Mrs. Henson still asleep, wrapped in the blanket he had given her, he felt at peace. She looked calmer than the night before, her face relaxed instead of worried. The wrinkles around her eyes told a story of years lived, struggles faced, and perhaps countless moments of love and loss. Marcus thought of his own mother again, and his heart softened. Life had a strange way of bringing people together. The clinking of dishes came from the kitchen. Marcus turned his head and saw Leah standing on a chair, trying her best to pour cereal into 2 bowls. She was humming to herself, her messy hair tied into little puffs on each side of her head. She noticed her dad watching and smiled proudly. "Good morning, Daddy." "I'm making breakfast," she whispered loudly, not wanting to wake the guest. Marcus chuckled softly and walked over. "You're doing a great job, sweetheart, but let me help before we have cereal all over the floor." Leah giggled as her dad steadied the milk carton in her small hands. Together, they prepared a simple breakfast of cereal, toast, and some fruit. The smell of toasted bread slowly filled the apartment, and soon Mrs. Henson began to stir. She sat up, blinking against the light. "Oh my! I must have fallen asleep." She looked around, slightly embarrassed, before her eyes landed on Marcus. "Thank you for letting me stay, son. I don't know what I would have done out there last night." Marcus gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry about it. I couldn't let you wander in the cold." Leah skipped over with her cheerful voice. We made breakfast. Do you want some? Mrs. Henson's eyes softened. She smiled warmly at the little girl. I would love some, dear. They all sat down at the small dining table. It was old and a little shaky, but at that moment, it felt full of life. Leah chattered happily about her school, her friends, and how she was practicing a new song for the class recital. Mrs. Henson listened intently, nodding and laughing at the right moments, as though she had known Leah forever. Marcus mostly listened, watching the scene quietly. He couldn't remember the last time their small home felt this alive. Usually, it was just him and Leah, and while their bond was unbreakable, the silence sometimes weighed heavily on him. This morning felt different. It felt like the warmth of family, the kind of feeling he hadn't experienced in years. After breakfast, Mrs. Henson placed her hands gently on the table. I really should call my sister. She must be worried sick. Marcus nodded and handed her his phone. She dialed a number carefully, her fingers trembling slightly. After a few rings, a woman's voice answered, full of panic. Where have you been? We've been looking everywhere for you. Tears welled in Mrs. Henson's eyes. I'm safe, Margaret. A kind young man and his daughter took me in last night. I'll explain everything when I see you. Relief and gratitude poured out from the voice on the other end. They agreed to meet later that day, but Mrs. Henson insisted on staying just a little longer. While Marcus cleaned the kitchen, Mrs. Henson sat with Leah on the couch. The little girl showed her drawings and read from one of her storybooks, stumbling on the big words but trying her best. Mrs. Henson gently helped her pronounce them, her patience endless. At one point, Leah turned to her and said innocently, You remind me of Grandma. I don't really remember her, but Daddy says she was kind like you. Mrs. Henson's eyes grew moist again, and she pulled Leah into a gentle hug. Thank you, dear. That means more to me than you know. From the kitchen, Marcus watched quietly. He wasn't sure why, but something about this moment touched him deeply. It reminded him of what had been missing in Leah's life, the presence of an older figure, someone who could give her wisdom and comfort in ways he sometimes struggled to. By afternoon, Marcus decided to take Mrs. Henson to meet her sister. They walked together through the neighborhood, Leah skipping happily between them, holding each of their hands. The image would stay in Marcus's mind forever, the innocence of his daughter, the warmth of the elderly woman, and himself, feeling like, for once, life wasn't just about struggle, it was about unexpected blessings. When they reached her sister's home, a worried woman in her 60s rushed out. She hugged Mrs. Henson tightly, tears streaming down her face. Don't ever scare me like that again. Mrs. Henson introduced Marcus and Leah. This young man and his little girl saved me. I don't know what I would have done without them. Her sister turned to Marcus, gratitude all over her face. Thank you. Truly. Most people wouldn't have bothered to help. Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. It was the right thing to do. Before leaving, Mrs. Henson took Marcus's hands in hers. Her voice was soft but steady. You could have closed your door and ignored me. But you didn't. You opened your home, even when I was just a stranger. That kind of kindness, it changes people. Leah hugged her tightly, not wanting to let go. Will you come visit us? She asked, her big eyes shining. Mrs. Henson smiled. If your daddy doesn't mind, I would love to. On the way home, Marcus held Leah's hand in silence. He couldn't help but think about Mrs. Henson's words. He had acted out of instinct, out of what he thought was basic decency, but the way she looked at him made him realize it was more than that. It wasn't just about letting her in, it was about letting kindness guide him, even when life was already hard. That night, after Leah fell asleep, Marcus sat quietly on the couch where Mrs. Henson had slept. He stared at the empty cushion and thought about the way she had smiled at Leah, the way she had spoken to him with gratitude. Something inside him stirred a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in a long time. Hope. He didn't know it yet, but that single choice, opening his door to a lost elderly woman, was about to change more than just one night. It was the beginning of something that would shape all of their lives in ways he couldn't yet imagine. A week passed since the night Mrs. Henson had knocked on Marcus's door. Life seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm, but something about that evening continued to linger in Marcus's mind. It wasn't only the act of kindness he had shown, it was the feeling that came afterward, the warmth of connection, the sense that maybe life didn't always have to be lonely struggles and long days of work. Leah hadn't stopped talking about Mrs. Henson. Every day after school, she asked her father if they could visit or if Mrs. Henson would come by. She had drawn a picture of the three of them holding hands and proudly taped it to the wall above her bed. "See, Daddy," she said one night, pointing to the picture, "we look like a family. I like when she's with us." Marcus had smiled at her words, but they had struck a deeper chord inside him. Leah was missing something he couldn't give her on his own: the comfort of a grandmotherly presence, the type of love that came with gentle patience and wisdom. One Saturday morning, just as Marcus was finishing folding laundry, there was another knock at the door. This time, when he opened it, he didn't see a stranger. He saw Mrs. Henson, standing there with a bright smile and holding a small basket. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said warmly. "I thought I might come by and bring something for you and Leah." Leah, who had been in her room playing with her dolls, came running out at the sound of her voice. "Mrs. Henson," she squealed happily, hugging her around the waist. "You came back." Mrs. Henson laughed softly, bending down to hug her back. "Of course I did, dear. I promised, didn't I?" She handed the basket to Marcus, who looked inside to find homemade cookies, some fresh fruit, and even a few simple groceries. His heart tightened with gratitude. He was used to always being the one to provide, no matter how hard it was, and receiving help even in such a small way felt unusual but comforting. "You didn't have to do this," Marcus said sincerely. "I know," Mrs. Henson replied gently. "But I wanted to. Consider it a thank you for your kindness." From that day on, Mrs. Henson became a frequent visitor. Sometimes she would stop by in the afternoons after visiting her sister. Other times she came on weekends with her knitting bag, sitting on the couch while Leah eagerly showed her new books, drawings, or songs she had learned at school. Marcus noticed how naturally she fit into their lives. Leah would sit beside her as she told gentle stories about her childhood, about how she and her husband had raised their children, and how the world seemed to move slower in those days. Leah would listen with wide eyes, often asking curious questions. "Did kids have tablets back then?" she asked once, making both adults laugh. "No, dear," Mrs. Henson chuckled, "we had to use our imagination. We made up games, played outside until the sun went down, and told each other stories." Leah thought about that carefully, then declared, "I think that sounds more fun than tablets." Marcus found himself smiling more during those visits. After long shifts at work, he would come home to find Leah and Mrs. Henson laughing together, the sound filling the apartment with warmth. It was something he hadn't realized he needed: the sense of not being alone in raising his daughter. One evening, after Leah had gone to bed, Marcus and Mrs. Henson sat quietly at the table sipping tea. She looked at him with kind eyes. "You're doing a wonderful job, Marcus. I can see how much you love Leah. She's a bright, happy child, and that's because of you." Marcus lowered his gaze. "I try my best, but some days it feels like I'm not giving her enough. She deserves more than this tiny apartment and a tired dad who's always working." Mrs. Henson shook her head softly. "What she needs most, you're already giving her. Love, safety, and someone who listens. Children remember love more than they remember toys or big houses. Believe me, I know." Her words stayed with him long after that night. The weeks turned into months, and the bond between them grew stronger. Mrs. Henson became like family. She started attending Leah's school events, cheering louder than anyone in the audience. When Leah had her recital, she waved proudly from the crowd, clapping so hard her hands turned red. At home, she would sometimes cook dinner for them, filling the apartment with smells Marcus hadn't enjoyed in years: freshly baked bread, warm casseroles, stews that reminded him of his own mother's cooking. Marcus would walk in after a long shift to find Leah setting the table with excitement, calling out, "Daddy, Mrs. Henson made dinner." He couldn't deny the comfort that brought. For the first time in a long time, life felt less heavy. There were still bills to pay and long hours at work, but now there was laughter, warmth, and shared meals that reminded him what family was supposed to feel like. One Saturday afternoon, as they sat together in the park, Leah running ahead to chase pigeons, Mrs. Henson turned to Marcus. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when I first knocked on your door that night, I thought I was only asking for help. But I realize now it was more than that. I didn't just find shelter, I found people I didn't even know I needed." Marcus looked at her, his chest tightening. "Funny thing is, I feel the same way. You've given Leah something I couldn't, someone who makes her feel like she has more family. For that, I'll always be grateful." They sat in silence for a while, both watching Leah laugh freely in the sunshine. Later that evening, Leah climbed into her bed after another long day of fun. She held her stuffed bear and looked at her father with sleepy eyes. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Mrs. Henson will always be around?" Marcus paused, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I hope so, baby girl. I really hope so." Leah smiled and whispered, "I like it better when she's here. It feels like Grandma came back." Her words touched Marcus deeply. After she fell asleep, he sat quietly in the living room. He thought about the changes in their lives, the unexpected kindness that had grown into something so much bigger. Mrs. Henson had come into their lives by accident, yet now it felt impossible to imagine life without her. Marcus realized that sometimes family isn't just the people you're born into, it's the people who walk into your life when you least expect them. And sometimes, those people fill the spaces you never even knew were empty. He leaned back on the couch, the same couch where Mrs. Henson had first spent the night, and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The months rolled by gently, like pages in a book turning one after another. Life for Marcus and Leah no longer felt as lonely as it once had. With Mrs. Henson now woven into their daily lives, the little apartment seemed brighter, even if nothing about it had changed physically. The furniture was still old, the walls still worn, and the bills still piled up on the counter. But the laughter, the warmth, and the sense of belonging had filled the cracks that once made Marcus feel like he was carrying the world on his own. One chilly evening in late autumn, Marcus was returning home from his second job. His shoulders were heavy from lifting boxes all day, but his heart lifted when he saw the glow of the apartment window from the street. As he climbed the stairs, he could already hear Leah's laughter spilling out, along with Mrs. Henson's softer chuckle. When he stepped inside, the smell of chicken stew greeted him, thick and savory, reminding him instantly of his childhood. Leah rushed to him, her little arms wrapping tightly around his waist. "Daddy. Mrs. Henson taught me how to roll dumplings," she announced proudly, her flour-dusted hands raised like a badge of honor. Mrs. Henson, standing by the stove, smiled warmly. "She's a quick learner, this one. You should be proud." Marcus smiled back, his exhaustion melting away. Dinner that night was filled with chatter. Leah told stories from school, Mrs. Henson shared bits of wisdom, and Marcus found himself laughing more than he had in years. It wasn't just a meal, it felt like home, in the truest sense. But as time went on, Marcus noticed something. Though Mrs. Henson was always cheerful, there were moments when her face grew distant, her smile faltering slightly. Sometimes she forgot where she had put her knitting needles, or she would repeat the same story she had told just the day before. At first, Marcus brushed it off. Everyone forgot things sometimes. But then, one afternoon, Leah came home upset. "Daddy," she said quietly, "Mrs. Henson forgot my name today. She called me Mary." She looked really scared when I corrected her. Marcus's heart tightened. He had noticed it too, the slips in memory, the pauses when she seemed lost in her own mind. That night, after Leah went to bed, he sat down with Mrs. Henson at the kitchen table. The warm yellow light above them cast gentle shadows, and the air was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "Mrs. Henson," Marcus began softly, "can I ask you something?" She looked at him, her eyes kind but weary. "Of course, dear. Have you been forgetting things lately? I don't mean small things. I mean names, places, or conversations." Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them on the table. She let out a slow breath. "I was hoping you hadn't noticed." Marcus stayed silent, giving her space. She looked down at her hands. "It started a while ago. Little things at first, forgetting to turn off the kettle, misplacing my keys. But lately, it's been worse. Sometimes I forget where I am, or I lose words mid-sentence. The night I ended up at your door, it wasn't just bad luck. I forgot the bus stop, I forgot the street, and then I panicked. My sister knows, but I didn't want to burden her. She has her own family to worry about." Marcus listened, his chest heavy with sympathy. He reached across the table and placed his hand gently over hers. "You're not a burden," he said firmly. "Not to us. Leah loves you." He paused, searching for the right words. "We're glad you're here." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled softly. "You've already done so much for me, Marcus. More than you'll ever know. I worry about what will happen as it gets worse." The honesty in her voice struck him deeply. He wanted to promise her everything would be all right, but he knew life wasn't that simple. Still, he could promise one thing. "Whatever happens, you're not alone. Not anymore." From that night on, Marcus became more attentive. He noticed the small things, how she sometimes struggled to remember the day of the week, or how she wrote little notes for herself to remember where she placed things. Leah, in her innocent way, adapted too. She would gently remind Mrs. Henson of names or repeat instructions patiently, never with judgment. Despite the challenges, their bond only grew stronger. One Sunday morning, Leah had a school event, a community play where she would perform on stage. Marcus had taken the day off work so he could attend, and Mrs. Henson insisted on coming too. The auditorium buzzed with excited parents and children. Marcus sat in the crowded rows, with Mrs. Henson beside him clutching a small bouquet of flowers she had bought for Leah. When Leah stepped onto the stage, her eyes searched the crowd until she found them. Her face lit up, and she performed with more energy than Marcus had ever seen. When the play ended, Leah rushed into their arms, laughing and hugging them both tightly. "Did you see me? Did you see me?" she asked breathlessly. "We saw every moment," Marcus said proudly. Mrs. Henson handed her the flowers, her smile shining through her tears. "You were wonderful, dear. Absolutely wonderful." Leah beamed, hugging her again. "You're like my grandma now," she said innocently, her voice full of love. Marcus saw the tears in Mrs. Henson's eyes and quickly pulled both of them into a group hug. It was a moment he knew Leah would never forget, and neither would he. That evening, as the three of them walked home together under the fading light, Mrs. Henson spoke quietly. "You asked me once why you helped me that night. I think I know the answer now. It wasn't just about helping me, it was about all of us finding each other. You gave me a place when I was lost, and in return, I've found a family I didn't know I still needed." Marcus looked at her, the weight of her words sinking deep. He thought about all the nights he had sat alone, wondering how he would get through another day. And here she was, reminding him that life had a way of sending light when you least expected it. Later that night, after Leah had gone to bed, Marcus sat quietly on the couch with Mrs. Henson. She was knitting, her hands moving slowly but carefully. He watched her in silence, feeling the depth of gratitude that words could never fully express. Finally, he spoke. "You've given us more than you realize. I thought I was helping you, but really, you've helped us just as much." Mrs. Henson smiled softly, not looking up from her knitting. "That's the beauty of kindness, Marcus. It goes both ways." The apartment fell into a gentle quiet, the kind that felt peaceful instead of lonely. And in that moment, Marcus realized the truth: sometimes, the greatest gifts in life come not from what we plan, but from the unexpected people who walk through our door when we least expect it. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and the little apartment that Marcus and Leah called home no longer felt quite so small. It wasn't the walls or the furniture that had changed, it was the life within them. Since the night Mrs. Henson had first arrived on their doorstep, the atmosphere had transformed. What was once a quiet space filled only with the hum of appliances and the soft voice of a child was now full of laughter, shared meals, and the rhythm of companionship. Marcus often thought about how quickly things had shifted. A chance knock on the door had become the beginning of a bond that felt stronger than years of acquaintance. Mrs. Henson was no longer just a guest, she was part of their lives in a way that felt natural, almost destined. One Saturday morning, the sun streamed brightly through the curtains, filling the room with golden light. Leah was buzzing with excitement as she pulled out her crayons and paper, determined to draw a picture for Mrs. Henson. "I'm making us a family portrait," she declared, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Daddy, you'll be in it, and me, and Mrs. Henson too. She's going to be right in the middle, because she holds us together." Marcus watched his daughter with a tender smile. Children had a way of seeing truths adults often missed. He realized Leah was right. In many ways, Mrs. Henson had become the center of their little world, not by taking control, but by filling it with warmth they hadn't even realized they were missing. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Henson arrived with her usual smile and a bag of homemade biscuits. She had become almost like clockwork, stopping by several times a week, each visit greeted with Leah's uncontainable joy. She sat down on the couch as Leah ran to her, waving the drawing proudly. "Look, I made us a family picture. See? That's you in the middle, holding our hands." Mrs. Henson's eyes glistened as she studied the child's work. "Oh, Leah, this is beautiful. I'll treasure it forever." She kissed Leah's forehead gently, and Marcus could see how much it meant to her. That evening, they shared dinner together. The table was simple, with mismatched plates and cups, but the laughter and stories flowing around it made it feel like a feast. Afterward, Leah curled up next to Mrs. Henson as she read aloud from one of her old storybooks. The sound of her gentle voice, steady and calm, filled the apartment. Marcus sat back quietly, taking it all in. For the first time in years, he felt like his daughter had the sense of family he had always wished for her. But even in these moments of joy, Marcus couldn't ignore the reality. Mrs. Henson's memory slips were becoming more frequent. Sometimes she forgot the day, other times she lost track of what she had been talking about. On one occasion, she left her knitting needles in the oven, mistaking it for a drawer. Thankfully, nothing serious happened, but it was a sobering reminder of her growing vulnerability. One night, after Leah was asleep, Marcus found Mrs. Henson sitting quietly at the table, staring at the notes she had written for herself. She looked up, her eyes tired. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I don't want to cause trouble for you and Leah. I never meant to lean on you so much." Marcus sat across from her, shaking his head. "You're not causing trouble. You've given us so much more than you realize. Leah adores you. And I'm grateful. You filled this home with something it was missing. Tears welled in her eyes, and she whispered, I was so afraid I'd spend the rest of my days feeling like a burden. But you've made me feel like family again. That moment stayed with Marcus. He knew then that no matter how difficult things became, he would stand by her, just as she had stood by them. Spring turned to summer, and their bond deepened. They spent weekends at the park, Leah running ahead with boundless energy, while Marcus and Mrs. Henson followed at a slower pace. Sometimes she struggled with her steps, but Marcus offered his arm, steady and patient. The three of them became a familiar sight in the neighborhood, an unlikely trio that somehow fit perfectly together. One warm evening, they sat on a bench watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Leah rested her head on Mrs. Henson's shoulder, while Marcus leaned back, feeling a rare sense of peace. Funny how life works, Mrs. Henson said softly. One wrong turn, one lost bus ride, and here we are. Marcus smiled. Sometimes the wrong turn takes you exactly where you're meant to be. As weeks passed, Mrs. Henson's sister expressed her gratitude for all Marcus had done. She offered to move her in permanently, worried about her memory and safety. But Mrs. Henson insisted on spending time with Marcus and Leah as often as possible. They're my family too, she told her sister firmly. I won't lose them. Her words touched Marcus deeply. He knew her condition might one day limit how often she could visit, but for now, he cherished every moment they had. One afternoon, Leah surprised both adults by announcing she wanted to throw a family day. She drew colorful invitations on scraps of paper and taped them to the fridge. We'll eat, play games, and tell stories. And we'll take a picture so we never forget it, she explained with determination. On the chosen day, they cooked together, Marcus at the stove, Mrs. Henson teaching Leah how to knead dough, and Leah bouncing between them with excitement. The apartment smelled of fresh bread and roasted vegetables. They played simple board games, laughed at Leah's jokes, and told stories late into the night. Before bed, Leah set up her small camera on a stack of books and insisted on a group picture. They all squeezed together on the couch, Marcus with his arm around Leah, Mrs. Henson holding Leah's hand, and smiled as the camera clicked. When Marcus looked at the picture later, his chest tightened with emotion. It wasn't just an image, it was proof of what they had become. A family, not by blood, but by choice, by kindness, and by the simple act of opening a door one cold night. As the seasons changed once more, Marcus often thought about the lessons he had learned. Life would always bring challenges, bills, work, exhaustion, and the unknown of Mrs. Henson's health, but it would also bring unexpected gifts. He had learned that kindness had a way of multiplying, creating bonds where none had existed before. One evening, as Leah fell asleep clutching the family picture, Marcus sat quietly by the window. Mrs. Henson was knitting on the couch, humming softly to herself. He thought about the path his life had taken, the loneliness, the struggles, and then the knock that had changed everything. He realized that night wasn't just about giving shelter to a lost woman. It was about letting love and kindness walk in, reshaping their lives in ways he never imagined. In the quiet glow of the apartment, Marcus felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Family, he thought, isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes, it's who finds you when you need them most. And with that, the story of a struggling father, a hopeful child, and a lost elderly woman came full circle, not an ending, but the beginning of a new kind of family, built on love, compassion, and the simple act of opening a door.